There, now we can see. Hey, guys, thank you so much for joining us. So, or me, as you probably know already. What the hell am I doing? Reading The Hobbit. You know it. I know it. Dogs know it. You hate it. Everybody hates this series. I mean, this series has been so resoundingly rejected and misused that I kind of like it, actually. The amount of hate I've been getting over this. Like, you read like crap. Yeah, well, great. I'm still gonna do it. Nearly done. Almost done. Let's see. We are at chapter 16. And there's not a lot left in the book. There's just a couple pages. And so this is the first time in a couple of nights. I was doing this, I don't know, a couple of nights in a row. And, I was averaging about 5 nights a week. 4 to 5 nights a week. And I gave a little break for the last few days because yesterday was my 15th anniversary with the seriously gorgeous Alicia. She is my life. She is my everything. I cannot live without her. So I decided to spend the whole day with her, like we have for the last month, and just like have a anniversary quarantine. So we've been doing that, and I decided to just shave everything except for this guy, and for her, because she hates the beard, and I'll do anything for her, almost anything for her. And also the other thing I've been up to the last few days is today, let's see, Wednesday, technically yesterday, was also my first day back to work in a month. I have desperately needed something to do. That's why I started up this series, so I had something to do. And yesterday, it's all work from home, which is a very interesting concept, the way we're doing it. It's basically, I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit. I work in TV, and they sent me a laptop that I've got to download a number of programs on. It allowed me and a number of other people who have different positions, TD, a director, and so forth, to all use the same program at once to get a program on the air. It's very interesting. It's kind of the most equivalent way I could put it is 3 people typing on one keyboard at the same time is the best way to put it. It's a little tricky, a little finagling. It's not perfect. It's not the best TV you're going to watch out there, but it's equivalent to all the other TV that's out there. I watched a little bit of Jimmy Fallon because Alicia seems to like him. I think he's a dead fish, or as funny as one. That's just my critique. Sorry, but and he's been doing the whole thing from home, and a lot of other people have been broadcasting from home, and I assume they're doing it very similar to the way that we are doing it. So it's just, it's what everybody's doing right now, and I'm just happy to be working again. I'm just really, really happy to be doing something. I'm not happy about having to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning like I normally do. But with that being said, back to work, anniversary. Let's wrap this boy up and see how we go. I mean, you know how it goes. Everyone knows how it goes. Sorry about that. That might have been a little loud. All right. Kind of a short chapter tonight. Let me see, 278. This is a very short chapter. I wonder if I should do 2 chapters. Let's see, the next chapter, let me just do a quick little... You know what? I think we're going to do it. We're going to do 2 chapters tonight. Little on the fly. 2 chapters. So, first up, chapter 16, A Thief in the Night. Let's see how I am after this first one. Now the days passed slowly and wearily. Many of the dwarfs spent their time pilling and ordering the treasure, and now Thorin spoke of the Arkenstone of Thrain, and bade them eagerly to look for it in every corner. For the Arkenstone of my father, he said, is worth more than a river of gold in itself. and to me it is beyond price. The stone of all the treasure I name unto myself, and I will be avenged to anyone who finds it and withholds it. Yeah. Alright, so that's a concept I've never really understood, really. How can something be so valuable that you cannot put a price on it? I mean, there's like bloodstones and whatever out there. The jewels are like the size of my fist or the size of grapefruits or whatever. And they're worth so much money that they can't even calculate it. How do you figure that out? There's got to be like some scientific way. Well, okay, 1 carat of this needs to be equivalent to that. There's got to be like some kind of mathematical way to figure out the value of something, as astronomically priced it might be. But I'm getting too far advanced. Let's continue. Alright, that stone of other treasure I name unto myself, and I will be avenged to anyone who finds it and withholds it. Bilbo heard these words, and he grew afraid, wondering what would happen if the stone was found, wrapped in an old bundle of tattered ornaments that he had used as a pillow. All the same, he did not speak of it, for as the weariness of the day grew heavier, the beginnings of a plan had come into his little head. Things had gone on like this for some time, and when the ravens brought news at Dane and more than 500 dwarves hurrying from the Iron Hills were now within about 2 days' march from Dale, coming from the northeast. But they cannot reach the mountain unmarked, said Rorak. Oh yeah, the raven, Rorak, can talk. But they cannot reach the mountain unmarked, and I fear lest there be a battle in the valley. I do not call this counsel good. Though they are grim folk, they are not likely to overcome the host that besets you. And even if they did so, will you ever again? Winter and snow is hastening behind them. How shall you feed without the friendship and goodwill of the lands around you? The treasure is likely be your death, though the dragon is no more. Bird is pretty wise. But Thorin was not moved. Winter and snow will bite both men and elves, he said, and they may find their dwellings in the waste ravenous to bear. With my friends behind them, and winter upon them, they will perhaps be in softer mood to parley with. That night Bilbo made up his mind. The sky was black and moonless. As soon as it was full and dark, he went to a corner of the inner chamber just within the gate and drew from his bundle a rope, and also the Arkenstone wrapped in a rag. Then he climbed to the top of the wall. Only Bombur was there, for it was his turn to watch, and the dwarves kept only one watchman at a time. It is mighty cold, said Bombur. I wish we could have up a fire here so they could have in camp. It is warm enough inside, said Bilbo. I dare say, but I am bound here till midnight, grumbled the fat dwarf. So sorry business altogether. Not that I venture to disagree with Thorin. May his beard ever grow longer. Yet he was ever a dwarf with a stiff neck. The hell does that mean? Not as stiff as my legs, said Bilbo. I am tired of stairs and stone passages. I would give a good deal for the feel of grass at my toes. I would give a good deal for the feel of a strong drink in my throat, and for a soft bed and a good supper. Ooh. Strong drink in my throat. Wise words, that Bombur. I can't give you those while the siege is going on, but it is long since I've watched, and I will take your turn for you if you like. There is no more sleep in me tonight. You are a good fellow, Mr. Baggins, and I will take your offer kindly. If there ever should be anything to note, rouse me at first, mind you. I will lie in the inner chamber on the left, not far away. Off you go, said Bilbo. I will wake you at midnight, and you can wake the next watchman. As soon as Bombur had gone, Bilbo put on his ring, fastened his rope, and slipped down over the wall, and was gone. He had about 5 hours before him. Bombur would sleep. He had about 5 hours before him. Bombur would sleep. Oh, he could sleep at any time, and he, ever since the adventure in the forest, had always tried to recapture the beautiful dreams he had then. And all the others were busy with Thorin. It was unlikely that any, even Feely or Keely, would come out on the wall until it was their turn. It was very dark, and the road, after a while, when he left the newly made path and climbed down towards the lower course of the stream, was strange to him. At last he came to the bend where he had crossed the water. If he was to make for the camp as he wished, the bed of the stream was as shallow but already broad, and foreboding it was in the dark. It was not easy for the little hobbit. He was nearly across when he missed his footing on a round stone and fell into the cold water with a splash. He had barely scrambled out onto the far bank, shivering and sputtering, when up came elves in the gloom with bright lanterns and flashed for the cause of the noise. "That was no fish," one said. "There is a spy about. Hide your lights. They will help him more than us if it was a strange little creature that is said to be their servant." "Servant, indeed," snorted Bilbo. In the middle of his snort, he sneezed loudly, and the elves immediately gathered towards the sound. "Let's have a light," he said. "I am here, if you want me," and he slipped off his ring and popped out from behind a rock. They seized him quickly in spite of their surprise. "Who are you? What are you, the dwarves? Are you the dwarves, Hobbit? What are you doing? How did you get so far past our sentinels?" they asked, one after another. "I am Mr. Bilbo Baggins," he answered. "Companion of Thorin, if you want to know. I know your king well by sight, though perhaps he does not know me to look at it. But Bard will remember me, and it is Bard I particularly want to see." "Indeed," they said, "and what may be your business?" "Whatever it is, it's my own, my good elves. But if you ever wish to get back to your own woods from this cold, cheerless place," he answered, shivering, "you might take me along to fire, where I can dry. Then you will let me speak to your chiefs as quickly as may be. I have only an hour or two to spare." That is how it came about. With some 2 hours after his escape from the gate, Bilbo was sitting beside a warm fire in front of a large tent, and there sat two, gazing curiously at him, both the elven king and bard. A hobbit in elvish armor, partly wrapped in an old blanket, was something new to them. "Really, you know," Bilbo was saying in his best business manner, "things are impossible. Personally, I am tired of the whole affair. I wish I was back in the West in my own home, where folks are more reasonable. I have been interested in that matter, 1/14th share to be precise, according to a letter, which, fortunately, I believe I kept." He drew from a pocket in his old jacket, where he still wore his old mail. Crumpled and much folded, Thorin's letter that may have been put under his cloak. Put under the clock in his mantelpiece in May. Blah. Now I see why you guys hate this series so much. I am such a terrible, terrible reader, but we're still gonna... You know what? I'm gonna have a surprise for the next chapter if we keep it going. "A share in the profits, mind you," he went on. "I am aware of that. Personally, I am only too ready to consider all your claims carefully and deduct what is right, the total, before putting in my own claim. However, you don't know Thorin Oakenshield as well as I do now. I assure you, he is quite ready to sit on a heap of gold and starve as long as you sit here." "We'll let him," said Bard. "Oh, we'll let him," said Bard. "Such a fool deserves to starve." "Quite so," said Bilbo. "I see your point of view. At the same time, winter is coming on fast. Before long, you will be having snow and whatnot, and supplies will be difficult, even for elves, I would imagine. There also will be other difficulties. Have you not heard of Dane and the dwarves of the Iron Hills?" "We have, a long time ago, but what has he got to do with us?" asked the king. I guess that's the elven king, not Bard. "I thought as much. I see I have some information you have not. Dane, I may tell you, is now less than 2 days' march off, and has at least 500 grim dwarves with him. A good many of them have experience in the dreadful dwarf and goblin wars, of which you have no doubt heard. When they arrive, there might be serious trouble." "Why do you tell us this? Why are you betraying your friends? Or are you threatening us?" asked Bard grimly. "My dear Bard," squeaked Bilbo, "don't be so hasty. I never met such suspicious folk. I am merely trying to avoid trouble for all concerned. Now I will make you an offer. Let us hear it, they said. You may see it, he said. This is it. And he drew forth the Arkenstone and threw away the wrapping. The Elven King himself, whose eyes were used to things of wonder and beauty, stood in amazement. Even Bard gazed in marveling in silence, as if a globe had been filled with moonlight and hung before them in a neat woven of the glint and frosty stars. This is the Arkenstone of Thrain, said Bilbo, the heart of the mountain. It is also the heart of Thorin. He values it above a river of gold. Okay. I give it to you. It will aid you in your bargaining. Then Bilbo, not without a shudder, not without a glance of longing, handed the marvelous stone to Bard, and it held in his hand as though dazed. But how is it yours to give? He asked with last in his effort. Oh, well, said the Hobbit uncomfortably. It isn't exactly. But, well, I am willing to let it stand against all my claim. You don't you know? I may be a burglar, or so they say. Personally, I never really felt like it. But I am an honest one. I hope more or less. Anyway, I'm going back now, and the dwarves can do what they like to me. I hope you will find it useful. The Elven King looked at Bilbo with new wonder. Bilbo Baggins, he said, you are more worthy to wear the armor of elf princes than many that have looked more comely in it. But I wonder if Thorin Oakenshield will see it so. I have more knowledge of dwarves in general than you, perhaps. I advise you remain with us, and here you shall be honored and thrice welcomed. Thrice? How do you welcome more than once? Welcome. 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 Doctor. 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 You get that joke? Let me know. Thank you very much, I am sure, said Bilbo, with a bow. But I don't think I ought to leave my friends like this. After all they have gone through together, and I promised to wake old Bomber at midnight, too. Really, I must be going, and quickly. Nothing they could say would stop him, so an escort was provided for him, and he went to the king, and Bard saluted him with honor. And they passed through the camp. An old man, wrapped in a dark cloak, rose from a tent from where he was sitting and came towards them. Well done, Mr. Baggins, he said, clasping Bilbo on the back. There is always more about you than anyone expects. It was Gandalf. For the first time for many a day, Bilbo was really delighted, but there was no time for all the questions he immediately wished to ask. All in good time, said Gandalf. Things are drawing towards the end now, unless I am mistaken. There is an unpleasant time just in front of you, but keep your heart up. You may come through at night. There is news brewing that even the ravens may not have heard. Good night. Puzzled, but cheered, Bilbo hurried on. He was guided to a safe ford that set across dry, and then, where he said farewell to the elves, climbed carefully back up the gate. Great weariness began to come over him, but it was well before midnight when he climbed up the rope again. It was still where he had left it. He untied it and hid it, and there he sat down on the wall and wondered anxiously what was happening next. At midnight, he woke up Bomber, and then in turn rolled himself up into his corner without listening to the old dwarf's thanks, which he felt he hardly earned. He was soon fast asleep, forgetting all of his worries till morning. As a matter of fact, he was dreaming of eggs and bacon. Oh, man. What is it about talking that just makes me freaking hungry? Okay. That is going to do it for Chapter 16. How long is Chapter 17? Let's see, 287. That's 10. That's 11 pages. We can do this. We're going to do this. Chapter 17. Right now! Right freaking now. Right after this quick commercial break as I have a water. Alright. So guys, thanks for joining. No, I don't need to go through the whole spiel all over again. Let's jump right into it. got a little... My wife got me a everything bagel this morning, and even to this point, I'm still picking those little black seeds out of from between my teeth. Hey, there's a lot going on with those everything bagels. And you know what? Since we're moving right along and we're nearing the end, it's return of the Scottish voice. That's right. Yes. I don't know what that voice is. It is clearly not Scottish. Yeah. All right, here we go. Ooh, there it is. In the trash you go. All right. Chapter 17, The Clouds Burst. That's not Scottish either, but we're going to keep at it because we're silly. The Clouds Burst. Next day, the trumpets rang early in the camp. Soon, a single runner was seen hurrying along the narrow path. At a distance, he stood and hailed them, asking whether Thorin would now listen to another embassy, since new tidings had come to hand and matters were changing. That would be Dane, said Thorin when he heard. There they had got wind of his coming. I thought that would alter their mood. Bid them come few in a number and weaponless, and I will hear. He called to the messenger. About midday, the banners for the forest and the lake were seen to be broadened forth again. The company of 20 were approaching. At the beginning of the narrow way, they laid aside sword and spear and came towards the gate, wondering. The dwarves saw that among them were both Bard and the Elven King. This Elven King's got a name, right? He does. He really does. I can't remember what it is. But they just came, Elven King. Just, what's your title? Elven King. Just with the stamp. I'm the Elven King now. Before whom an old man wrapped in a cloak and hood bore a strong cask for iron-bound wood. Okay. Hail, Thorin, said Bard. Are you still of the same mind? My mind does not change with the rising and setting of a few suns, said Thorin. Did you come to ask me idle questions? Still, the elf host was not departed as I bade. Still do you not come in vain to bargain with me? There is nothing for which you would yield any of your gold. Bard is a really gruff character, very... You know who. Nothing that you or your friends have to offer. What of the Arkenstone of Thrain? He said at the same moment an old man opened the casket and held aloft the jewel. The light leaping from his hands, bright... This isn't Bard talking. Bard stopped talking a while ago. The light leapt from his hand, bright and white in the morning. Then Thorin was stricken dumb with amazement and confusion. No one spoke for a long while. Thorin at length broke the silence, and with his voice was thick with wrath. That stone was my father's and is mine, he said. What should I purchase my own? But wonder overcame him, and he added, But how came you by the heirloom of my house? Is there need to ask such a question of thieves? We are not thieves, Bard answered. You owe your own we will give back in return for our own. How came you by it? Said Thorin in a gathering of rage. I gave it to them, said Bilbo, who was peeping out over the wall, now in the dreadful fright. You, cried Thorin, turning upon him and grasping with both hands. You miserable hobbit! You undersized burglar! You should have lost for words, and he shook poor Bilbo like a rabbit. By the beard of Durn, I wish I had Gandalf here. Curse him! Who's reading this? I don't know. Keep up with the voice. By the beard of Durn, I wish I had Gandalf here. Curse him and his choice for you. May his beard wither. As for you, I will throw you to the rocks, he cried, and lifted Bilbo in his arms. Stay! Your wish is granted, said a voice. The old man with the casket threw aside his hood and cloak. Here is... Oh boy, this is going to be tricky. Maybe I should just stick with one voice. Here is Gandalf, and none too, it seems. Yeah. If you don't like my burger, please don't damage him. Put him down and listen first to what he has to say. You all seem in league, said Thorin, dropping Bilbo on top of the wall. Never again will I have dealings with any wizard or his friends. What have you say, you descendant of rats? Okay. Dear me, said Bilbo. I'm sure all of this... Oh, this is... we're losing the accent already. Yeah. This is all very uncomfortable. You may remember saying that I might choose my own 14th chair. Perhaps I took it too literally. I have been told that dwarves are sometimes politer in word than in deed. This time was all the same. When you seem to think it is I that some Cerberus. Descendant of rats indeed. Is it all Cerberus of you and your family that I was promised, Thorin? Take it that I have disposed of my share as I wished, and let it go that I will. I will, said Thorin grimly. I will let you go, and at that we may never meet again. Then he turned and spoke over the wall. I am betrayed, he said. It was rightly guessed that I could not forbear to redeem the Arkenstone, the treasure of my house. For it is I give 1/14 of the share of the hoard in silver and gold, setting aside the gem. But that shall be accounted the promised share of this traitor, and what that reward is shall depart. If you can divide it as you will, he will get little enough, I doubt not. Take him if you wish him to live, and no friendship of mine goes with him. Get down now to your friends, he said to Bilbo, or I will throw you down. What of the gold and the silver? Asked Bilbo. That shall follow after as can be arranged, he said. Get down. Until then, we keep the stone, cried Bard. You are not making a very splendid figure of the king under the mountain, said Gandalf, but things may change yet. They may indeed, said Thorin, and already, so strong with the bewilderment of the treasure upon him, he was pondering whether, by the help of Dane, he might not recapture the Arkenstone without the share of the reward. And so Bilbo was swung down from the wall and departed with nothing for all his trouble, except for the armor which Thorin had given him already. More than one of the dwarves in his heart felt shame and pity in his going. Farewell, he cried to them. We may not meet again as friends. Be off, said Thorin. You may have mail upon you which was made by my folk, as it is too good for you. It cannot be pierced by arrows, but if you do not hasten, I will sting your miserable feet, so be swift. Not so hasty, said Bar. We will still give you until tomorrow. At noon we will return and see if you have brought the hoard, that portion that is set against the stone. If that is to be done without deceit, then we will depart, and the elf host will go back to his forest. In the meanwhile, farewell. With that they rose back to the camp, but Thorin sent messages by Rorak, telling Dane of what has passed, and bidding him come with wary speed. That day passed, and then the night. The next day the wind shifted west, and the air was dark and gloomy. The morning was still early when a cry was heard in the camp. Runners came up to report a host of dwarves had appeared in the eastern spur of the mountain and was now hastening to Dale. Dane had come. He had hurried on throughout the night and had come upon them sooner than expected. Each one of his folk is clad in in a hauberk of steel and mail that hung from his knees, and his legs were covered with hose and a fine and flexible metal mesh, the secret of whose making was possessed by Dane's people. The dwarves were exceedingly strong for their height, but most of the dwarves were strong even for dwarves. In battle they wielded short, heavy, two-handed mattocks, but each of them had a short broadsword at his side, with a round shield slung on his back. Their beards were forked and plaited and thrust into their belts. Their caps were of iron, and they were shod with iron, but their faces were grim. Trumpets called men and elves to arms. Before long, the dwarves could have been seen coming up the valley at a great pace. They halted between the river and the eastern spur, but a few held on their way, and crossing the river down near the camp, where they laid down their weapons and held up their hands in a sign of peace. Bar went out to meet them, and with him met Bilbo. "We are sent from Dane, son of Nain," they said, when questioned. "We are hastening to our kinsmen in the mountain, since we learn that the kingdom of old is renewed. But who are you to sit in the place of foes before defended walls?" Before this, of course, in the polite and rather old-fashioned language of such occasions, meant simply, "You have no business here. We are going on, so make way, or we shall fight you." They meant to push on between the mountain and the loop of the river, for the narrow land there did not seem strongly guarded. Bard, of course, refused to allow the dwarves to go straight on to the mountain. He was determined to wait until the gold and silver had been brought out in exchange for the Arkenstone, for he did not believe that this would be done. For if the fortress and the man was so large and warlike a company, they had brought with them a great store of supplies. For the dwarves can carry very heavy burdens, and nearly all of Dane folk, in spite of their rapid march, bore huge packs on their backs in addition to their weapons. They would stand a siege for weeks, and by the time more dwarves might come, and yet more, for Thorn had many relatives, they would also be able to reopen the guard some other gate, so that besiegers would have encircled the entire mountain, and for that they were not sufficient numbers. These were, in fact, precisely their plans for the raven messengers that had been busy between Thorin and Dane. But for the moment, their way was barred, and so after angry words, the dwarf messengers retired muttering in their beards. Bard then sent messengers at once to the gate, but they found no gold or payment. Arrows came forth as soon as they were within shot, and they hastened back in dismay. In the camp, all was now astir, as if for battle, for the dwarfs of Dane were advancing along the eastern bank. "Fools," laughed Bard, "to come thus beneath the mountain's arm. They do not understand war above ground. Whether they may not know of battle in the mines, there were many of our archers and spearmen now hidden in the rocks upon the right flank. Dwarf mail may be good, but it may soon be hard to put on. Let us set on them now before both sides, before they are fully rested." But the Elven King said, "Long I have tarried ere I be this Long I will tarry ere I began for this war. The dwarves cannot pass us unless we will do anything that cannot mock." Dude, English. You guys invented it. Stick to it. Let us hope still for something that will bring reconciliation. Our advantage in numbers will be enough if in the end it must come to unhappy blows. But he reckoned without But he reckoned without the dwarves. The knowledge that the Arkenstone was in the hands of the besiegers burned in their thoughts, and they also guessed the hesitation of Bard and his friends, and resolved to strike where they had debated. Suddenly, without a signal, they sprang silently forward to attack. Bows twanged and arrows whistled. Battle was about to be joined. Still, most suddenly a darkness came on with dreadful swiftness. A black cloud hurried over the sky. Winter thunder on a wild wind rolling up and rolled in the mountain, and lightning lit its peak. And beneath the thunder another blackness could be seen whirling forward. But it did not come with wind. It came from the north, like a vast cloud of birds, dense that no light could be seen between their wings. "Halt!" cried Gandalf, who appeared suddenly and stood alone, with arms uplifted between the advancing dwarves and ranks awaiting them. "Hot!" he cried in a voice like thunder, and his staff blazed down like a flash, like a lightning. "Dread has come upon you all, alas! It has come more swiftly than I had guessed. The goblins are upon you. Balg of the North is coming, O Dane, whose father you slew in Moria. Behold the bats above his wherry like a sea of locusts. That ride upon wolves and wargs are in their train." Amazement and confusion fell upon them all. Even as Gandalf had been speaking, the darkness grew. The dwarves held and gazed at the sky. The elves cried out with many voices. "Come," cried Gandalf, "there is yet time for counsel. Let Dane, son of Nain, come swiftly to us." So began the battle that none had expected. It was called the Battle of 5 Armies, and it was very terrible. Upon one side were the goblins and the wild wolves, and upon the other were elves and men and dwarves. This is how they fell out. Ever since the fall of the great goblin of the Misty Mountains, the hatred of the race for the dwarves had been rekindled to a fury. Messengers had passed to and fro between all the cities, colonies, and strongholds. For they had resolved now to win the dominion of the North. Tidings they had gathered in secret ways, and in the mountain there was forging and arming. There they marched and gathered by hill and valley, going over and ever by tunnel and under dark, until around and beneath under the great Gundabad, the great mountain Gundabad on the north, where there was capital, and a vast host of assembled ready to sweep down in time to storm unaware upon the south. There they learned of the death of Smaug, and joy was in their hearts, and they hastened night after night through the mountains, and came thus, and last in the sudden from the north hard on the heels of Dane. Not even the ravens knew of their coming until they came out in the broken lands which divided the lonely mountain from the hills behind. How much Gandalf knew he cannot be said, but it is plain he had not expected this sudden assault. This is the plan that he had made in the council with the Elven King and with Bard, and with Dane, for the Dwarf Lord now joined them. The goblins were the foes of all, and at their coming over-quarreled and were forgotten. Their only hope was to lure the goblins into the valley between the arms of the mountain, and themselves to man the great spurs that struck south in the east. Yet this would be perilous. If the goblins were in the sufficient number to overrun the mountain itself, and so attack them from beyond and above, there was no time to make any other plan, or to summon any help. Soon the thunder passed, rolling along the southeast, but the bat cloud came, flying lower, over the shoulder of the mountain, and whirled above them, shutting out the light and filling them with dread. "To the mountain!" cried Bard. "To the mountain! Let us take our place where it is yet time." On the southern spur, it is the lowest slopes and the rocks at their feet, the elves were set, and the eastern spur were met with men and dwarves. But Bard and some of the nimblest of men and elves climbed to the height of the eastern shoulder to gain a new view of the north. Soon they could see the lands behind the mountain feet, black with a hurrying multitude. Eerie long and vanguard swelled around the spur end and came rushing onto Dale. There were the swiftest wolf riders, and already their cries and howl rented the air far. A few brave men were stung before them, making a feint of resistance, and many there fell before the rest, drew back, and fled to either side. As Gandalf had hoped, the goblin army had gathered behind the resisted vanguard, and poured now into the valley, driving wildly up between the arms and the mountain, seeking foe for foe. Their banners were countless, black and red, and they came on like a tide in fury and disorder. It was a terrible battle, the most dreadful of all Bilbo's experience, and one in which time he hated most, which is to say, one that he was the most proud of. What? Which is to say, it was the one he was the most proud of. Okay, wonder why. And most fond of recalling long afterwards, although he was quite unimportant in it. Although, actually, I might say he put on his ring early in the business and vanished from sight, if not from all danger altogether. A magic ring and that sort is not complete protection in a goblin charge, nor does it stop flying arrows or wild spears, but it does help in getting out of the way and prevents your head from being specifically chosen for sweeping stroke by a goblin swordsman. The elves were the first to charge. Their hatred for the goblins is cold and bitter. Their spears and swords shone in the gloom and the gleam of the chill flame. So deadly was the wrath of the hands that held them. As soon as the host of their enemies was dense in the valley, they sent against it a shower of arrows, and even flickered it as fled with stinging fire. Behind the arrows, 1,000 of the spearmen leapt down and charged. Their yells were deafening. The rocks were stained black with goblin blood. Oh yeah, we're in the Battle of the Five Armies, apparently. Just as the goblins were recovering from the onslaught and the elf charge was halted, there rose from across the valley a deep-throated roar, with cries of Moria and Dane, Dane. The dwarves of Iron Hills plunged in, wielding their mattocks upon the other side, and became them the men of the lake with long swords. Hey, long swords, huh? Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more. Panic came upon the goblins, and they even turned to meet their new attack. The elves charged again, with renewed numbers. Already many of the goblins were flying back down to the river to escape from the traps, and many of their own wolves were turning up and rendering the dead of the wounded. Turning upon them and rendering the dead and the wounded. Okay. Victory seemed at hand when a cry rang out from the heights above. Goblins had scaled the mountain from either side, and already many were on the slopes above the gate, and others were streaming down recklessly, heedless for those that fell screaming from cliff to precipice, and attacked the spurs from above. Each of them could be reached by any pass that ran down the main path of the mountain in the center, and the defenders had too few to bar the way too long. Victory was now vanished from hope. There had only seemed first onslaught of the black tide. Day drew on. The goblins are gathered again in the valley. There a host of wargs came ravaging. With them came the bodyguard of Bolog. Goblins of huge size with scimitars of steel. Some actual darkness was coming into a stormy sky, while still the great bats swirled above their heads, and ears of elves and men, or fastened vampire-like onto the stricken. Now Bard was fighting to defend the eastern spur, and yet giving slowly back. The elf lords were at bay about their king upon the southern arm, nearing the watch post on Ravenhill. Getting good. Suddenly there was a great shout from the gate. Came a trumpet call. They had forgotten about Thorin. Part of the wall, moved by levers, fell outward with a crash onto the pool. Out leapt the king under the mountain, and his companions followed him. Hood and cloak were gone. They were in shining armor, and red light leapt from their eyes. In the gloom the great dwarf gleamed like gold in dying fire. Rocks were hurled down from on high by the goblins above, but they held on, leapt down by the false foot, and rushing towards battle. Wolf and rider fell or fled before them. Thorin wielded his axe with mighty strokes, and nothing seemed to harm him. To me, elves and men, to me, oh my kinsfolk, he cried, and the voice shook like a horn in the valley. Down, heedless of order, rushed of all the dwarves of Dane to help. Down too came many of the lakemen, for Bard had not restrained them, and upon the other side came many of the spearmen of the elves. Once again the goblins were stricken in the valley, and they were piled in heaps till Dale was dark and hideous with their corpses. The wargs were scattered, and Thorn drove right against the bodyguard of Bolog. But he could not pierce their ranks. Already behind him, among the goblin dead, lay many men and many dwarves, and many a fair elf that had lived a long yet ages merrily in the wood. And there the valley widened. His onset grew slower. His numbers were too few. His flanks were unguarded. Soon the attackers were attacked, and they were forced into a great ring, facing every which way, hemmed all about the goblin and the wolves remaining in this assault. The bodyguard of Bolog came howling against them, and drove in upon the ranks like waves upon cliffs of sand. Their friends could not help them, for the assault on the mountain was renewed with redoubled force, and upon the other side of men and elves they were being slowly beaten down. In all of this, Bilbo looked with misery. He had taken his stand on Ravenhill amongst the elves, partly because there was more chance of escape from that point, and partly more tookish part of his mind, because if he was going to be in the last desperate stand, he preferred on the whole to defend the Elven King. Gandalf, too, I may say, was there, sitting on the ground as if in deep thought, preparing, I suppose, some last blast of magic before the end. That did not seem far off. It will not be long now, thought Bilbo, before the goblins win the gate, and we are all slaughtered or driven down and captured. Really, it is enough to make one weep. After all one has gone through. I would rather old Smaug had been left with all the wretched treasure, than that these vile creatures should get it, and poor old Bomba, and Balin, and Fili and Kili, and all the rest come to a bad end. And Bard, too, and the Lakemen, and the merry elves. Misery me! I have heard songs of many battles. I have always understood that the defeat may be glorious. It seems very uncomfortable, not to say distressing. I wish I was well out of it. The clouds were torn by the wind, and the red sunset slashed the west. Seeing the sudden gleam in the gloom, Bilbo looked around. He gave a great cry. It had seen a sight that made his heart leap. Dark shape, yet small, majestic against the distant glow. "The eagles! The eagles!" he shouted. "The eagles are coming!" Bilbo's eyes were seldom wrong. The eagles were coming, down with the wind, line after line, in such a host as must have been gathered from the eyries of the north. The eagles, Bilbo cried, dancing and waving his arms, as if the elves could not see him, they could hear him. Soon they took up to the cry, and it echoed through the valley. Many wondering eyes looked up, and though as yet nothing could be except from the southern shoulders of the mountain. "The eagles!" cried Bilbo once more, but at that moment a stone hurtling from above smote heavily on his helm, and he fell with a crash and knew no more. Guys, that was chapter 17. Parting in the clouds burst. Whew. Alright, let's see. Oh, we have 2 chapters left, and they're memorable ones, so we are going to take our time. We're not going to blitz through them like we did tonight with these 2. But I definitely wanted to get through... Yeah, we're going to nurse these last 2 chapters. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in if you're watching the replay, which I know you're not. No one ever does. But we got an hour, read 2 chapters tonight. Perfect. Love it. I loved it. I hope you did too. Go ahead, like this video. That would make me feel good. It won't do anything for the video's status, especially with I don't think any of these videos have gone over 9 views, but either way, hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you really enjoy it, And I see people are watching right now, tuning in now. Great timing. But join us. We have 2 chapters remaining of The Hobbit. I'm doing silly voices. I'm probably going to keep that up too. 2 more chapters left. We will get to those. Let's see. I don't know when, but why don't you subscribe? That way you can catch up whenever I do them. Or just follow me on Twitter at Skipper Bob Breakdown. Yeah, that's the deal. So guys, thanks again for watching. I hope you have a great night.